The cameras had barely begun to roll when the tension between Keanu Reeves and Joy Behar started to simmer, an undercurrent that no one in the audience could ignore. Keanu, typically the embodiment of calm, entered the studio with his usual quiet smile, his aura radiating that grounded humility fans admired, but Joy Behar was ready to stir the pot. From the moment introductions ended, she peppered him with loaded questions, mocking his soft-spoken manner and belittling his attempts to keep the conversation lighthearted. She pushed harder, prodding into his personal philosophies, even dismissing his humanitarian efforts as Hollywood stunts, her tone dripping with sarcasm. At first, Keanu tried to deflect with grace, nodding politely and choosing his words carefully, but the relentless interruptions and Joy's smirks began to cut deeper. The audience, sensing the storm brewing, fell into an uneasy hush, their eyes darting between Joy's sharp jabs and the flicker of restrained anger that started to glint in Keanu's eyes. Then, in a stunning moment that no one had anticipated, his composure faltered, his voice rose with an intensity that rattled the entire set, his words laced with a rawness that silenced even the most cynical faces on the panel. It was the side of Keanu Reeves no one had seen before, and it marked the explosive beginning of a confrontation that would leave the view reeling and social media ablaze. As the clash deepened, what had begun as Joy Behar's trademark prodding escalated into something far sharper, and the audience could feel the shift as if the temperature in the studio had suddenly spiked. Keanu Reeves, who had always been lauded as the epitome of patience, tried at first to steer the conversation back toward his film and his humanitarian projects, but Joy wouldn't relent, cutting him off mid-sentence, mocking his tendency to pause and reflect before answering, and sneering at the idea that someone so private could genuinely be considered a man of the people. The camera caught the flicker of frustration across Keanu's face as his jaw clenched and his hands curled tightly in his lap, a visible sign that the calm exterior was beginning to crack. His voice, when it finally broke through, was sharper than anyone in the audience had ever heard from him, steady, controlled, but laced with steel as he called out the toxicity of constant mockery and the damage that relentless cynicism inflicted not only on individuals but on culture itself. The words reverberated across the studio, silencing the crowd into stunned stillness. Even the co-hosts who usually jumped in to cushion such exchanges sat frozen, their wide eyes betraying the shock of watching Hollywood's most composed figure unleash the fury he had kept hidden for decades. It wasn't just a disagreement anymore. It was a seismic confrontation that promised to ripple far beyond that morning's broadcast. By the third escalation, the atmosphere on set had shifted from tense to explosive, and it was clear to everyone in the studio that this wasn't going to be one of those heated exchanges that fizzled out with a quick joke or commercial break. Keanu Reeves, usually the picture of restraint, leaned further into the confrontation, his voice rising with a conviction that cut like a blade through the chatter of the panel. He spoke passionately about integrity, kindness, and the importance of listening, principles he lived by and ones he felt Joy Behar was deliberately trampling with her dismissive tone. Joy, unwilling to back down, tried to brush him off with mocking laughter, but the sound rang hollow, almost forced, as if she hadn't expected him to push back with such fire. The audience sat frozen, caught between shock and fascination, their eyes locked on the rare spectacle of a man known for his humility transforming into a force of unshakable defiance. Every camera angle seemed to capture a different facet of Keanu's rage, the clenched jaw, the burning eyes, the controlled but powerful gestures of his hands as he drove his point home. Even the co-hosts, normally quick to jump into the fray, stayed quiet, sensing that this was bigger than a debate. It was a raw unveiling of a side of Keanu Reeves that no one, not even his most loyal fans, had ever seen before. By the fourth moment of the clash, the studio felt less like a daytime talk show and more like a courtroom where every word was evidence, every glare a verdict, and the audience the stunned jury. Keanu Reeves, his calm facade fully shattered, fixed Joy Behar with an unflinching stare that seemed to silence even the air between them. His voice, deeper and sharper now, carried the weight of someone who had tolerated too much for too long, as he accused her of disrespect, not just toward him but toward countless guests who had faced the same dismissive treatment. The passion in his words revealed not just anger but pain, as if he were channeling years of watching people be ridiculed for their values, mocked for their sincerity, or belittled for daring to speak authentically. Joy tried to interrupt again, her trademark smirk faltering just slightly, but Keanu's voice rolled right over her attempts, commanding the room with an authority no one had expected from Hollywood's so-called gentle soul. The audience gasped, some clapping in support, others shifting uneasily in their seats, unsure of where their loyalty should lie. Off to the side, the other hosts sat frozen, glancing nervously between the combatants, aware that stepping in might only fuel the fire. What had begun as just another sparring session on The View had transformed into a spectacle of raw confrontation, a collision of personalities so intense that it left everyone watching breathless, waiting to see which of them would break first. By the fifth eruption, the atmosphere inside the studio was so charged it felt as if every breath could ignite a firestorm. Keanu Reeves, no longer the soft-spoken guest audiences had expected, rose slightly in his seat, his posture straight and commanding, every movement radiating a power that no one could ignore. His voice thundered now, not in uncontrolled rage but in the deliberate cadence of a man who had finally drawn a line in the sand, telling Joy Behar and the entire panel that belittling compassion, humility, and decency was not wit, it was cruelty. The audience, electrified, erupted into mixed reactions, half applauding with cheers of support for Keanu's bold stand, half stunned into silence by the sheer audacity of the confrontation. Joy, visibly rattled though still clinging to her trademark bravado, tried to cut him off with a sharp retort, but the words barely left her lips before Keanu's piercing rebuttal drowned them out. His intensity was undeniable, his anger sharpened not by ego but by conviction, and for the first time, Joy looked as though she had been backed into a corner she couldn't laugh her way out of. The other co-hosts exchanged nervous glances, hands fidgeting with their cue cards, silently begging for a commercial break that seemed forever delayed. But the cameras stayed locked, capturing every moment of this once-in-a-lifetime explosion, the day Keanu Reeves, Hollywood's eternal calm, finally let the world see the fire burning beneath. By the fifth crescendo of the confrontation, the entire studio seemed to tremble beneath the force of Keanu Reeves' fury, a storm so unexpected that even the seasoned audience regulars sat frozen, jaws slack, as if afraid to breathe too loudly. The man who had built a reputation over decades as Hollywood's quiet, humble gentleman was now transformed, his words slicing with the precision of a blade honed by years of pent-up frustration, and every syllable landed with a finality that made Joy Behar's usual arsenal of sarcasm sound suddenly flimsy. He stood in stark contrast to the caricature Joy tried to paint of him. Far from aloof or detached, Keanu was raw, present, and incandescent with conviction, his voice booming across the studio like a challenge that couldn't be ignored. Joy tried, once more, to interrupt, her laughter pitched too high, too forced, betraying the cracks in her composure, but Keanu's eyes, dark, steady, unyielding, silenced her more effectively than any moderator could. The crowd, sensing history in the making, broke into divided uproar, some cheering for Joy's resilience, others roaring their approval for Keanu's uncharacteristic eruption, the noise swelling to the point that the stage lights seemed to vibrate under its intensity. Behind the cameras, producers flailed with frantic signals, desperate for a cutaway, but no one dared look away, not the hosts, not the audience, not even Joy herself, locked in a duel that had stripped away all pretense. It was no longer an interview, no longer entertainment, it was a reckoning, live and unfiltered, that would echo long after the cameras stopped rolling. By the sixth surge of tension, the set of The View had become an inferno of clashing voices, energy, and emotions, but Keanu Reeves' presence dominated the chaos like a towering flame that refused to be extinguished. He leaned forward now, every muscle taut, his voice cutting through the noise with the clarity of a bell tolling in a storm, firm, controlled, yet vibrating with a passion that made the entire room quiver. He called out the culture of constant mockery, how dismissing sincerity had become entertainment, and how damaging it was to those who dared to live authentically. Each word struck with such force that the audience felt less like spectators of a daytime show and more like witnesses to a courtroom confession, the truth laid bare for all to see. Joy Behar, usually the queen of comebacks, fumbled for words, her laughter ringing hollow as Keanu's unwavering intensity pinned her to her seat, her smirk finally cracking into something that looked perilously close to unease. The other co-hosts, wide-eyed, sat motionless, their cards trembling in their hands, silently praying for a producer's cue that never came. The crowd, whipped into frenzy, split into warring camps, some clapping, some booing, all of them unable to tear their eyes from the Hollywood icon who had, in one fiery moment, shattered every expectation of his calm, untouchable persona. What had once been an interview was now a cultural earthquake, the tremors of which promised to ripple across television, social media, and living rooms around the world for weeks to come. By the seventh explosive moment, the entire studio felt like it was holding its breath, suspended in the eye of a storm that showed no sign of calming. Keanu Reeves, no longer the soft-spoken guest the audience thought they knew, radiated a controlled ferocity that commanded every gaze in the room. His words came in measured bursts, each one sharper than the last, as he tore into the hollowness of Joy Behar's mockery, exposing the cruelty hidden behind the mask of humor. He spoke of kindness as strength, of compassion as courage, and of dignity as something that could not be trampled without consequence, ideas that seemed to resonate deeply with many in the audience, who erupted into thunderous applause mid-sentence, drowning out even the desperate signals of the producers offstage. Joy, her confidence visibly shaken now, tried to rally with a biting remark, but it landed weakly, like a dull arrow against armor too strong to pierce. Keanu's eyes burned with an intensity that silenced her before he even responded, a wordless assertion of dominance that no smirk could undo. The co-hosts exchanged uneasy glances, their forced smiles unable to disguise the fact that they were witnessing history, an interview turned battlefield, where reputations and egos clashed under the unblinking eye of live television. In that moment, Keanu Reeves wasn't just a movie star, he was a man transformed, his fury a mirror reflecting the audience's hunger for authenticity and truth, and it left the entire studio vibrating with the knowledge that they had just seen something unforgettable.